Hello everyone, welcome back to another film discussion. My name is Adam, and in today's episode I want to talk all about the Star Wars Skywalker saga. It's a collection of 9 films filmed over many different decades, and the first 6 films are available on many different formats in many different versions, and the entire 9 films are available on a giant 4K set called the Skywalker Family Saga. And it's got all the bonus features available on the previous Blu-rays and the 9 films in 4K, and is priced £250 in the UK and is a giant waste of money. It's a giant con job by Disney that we're going to talk about, that nobody seems to be talking about, where you pay £250 and get 9 4K discs with only 3 actual 4K films on those discs. The other 6 are upscales, which stem from the same master as the Blu-ray, the DVD, and are no better, effectively, except for HDR. The format of 4K gives you HDR, which gives extended color palette and extended luminance values, and that's basically all you're getting. You know, the packaging is a complete screw you to the fans, and we're going to get into it. And to help us get into it, we're going to go back and talk about the production of all 9 films to have a full understanding of what I'm saying. And also, I want to share with everybody my favorite way of watching Star Wars. And I'd love to hear from your point of view, your favorite way to watch Star Wars. Which versions do you watch? What formats do you watch? Please put it down in the comments below. And when we get to the end, I also want to turn it on its head and actually talk about the naming of all these 9 films, because I feel they're completely incorrectly named and that they all share each other's name, really, which I don't know if it's a genius move by the creators or an accidental stupidity move, but all 9 films are incorrectly named, and they actually have got each other's name that pertains more to the story, which we'll go through at the end of this video. So, to understand why that 4K box set is utter trash, let's go back to 1977, back to the original trilogy. 1977 to 1983, the OG trilogy. So these films, which sadly are not available really on 4K officially at all, the original trilogy, before any changes were made, like what was shown in the theaters, isn't available officially on any 4K disc, and it's such a shame, because they have got the ability truly to be a true 4K, more so than the 3 versions that appear in that saga set or on any 4K disc anywhere else. The only way you can actually go get those original trilogy, films on 4K is through bootleg means, with the Project 77 and Project 80 and Project 83. They will put to disc those 3 films, which I do have on Blu-ray. So these are those 3 films on Blu-ray, 1080p. The original theatrical prints are on here, and that is the only way to actually go get, and that's kind of like illegal means, because the makers of those discs don't have the right to sell them. So, it is what it is. Okay, so the 3 original Star Wars films were all filmed and made identically in the same way in terms of the technology. So all 3 films are a mixture of live action elements, models shot, and optical effects added. And all 3 films are exactly the same in that respect. There is live action footage filmed on 35mm. There is models that were shot on 35mm in the VistaVision format, which basically takes the 35mm frame, turns it on its side, and allows for more of the negative to be exposed to whatever it's filming, creating a higher quality picture. And so all the model work that was done for all the 3 films was filmed VistaVision on 35mm. And then all the optical special effects, like the laser blasts, the lightsabers, and some other things, were all actually rotoscoped onto the negative itself. So the entire 3 original trilogy is fully on 35mm. It was filmed on 35mm. It was mastered and finished on 35mm, creating all these 3 elements combined to make a new negative. And then that negative was made prints, and off into the cinema it went. And those 3 films, you know, have the true potential to be a true 4K, because all the elements come from 35mm. And, you know, 35mm does look good on 4K when it's scanned at 4K and finished on the disc in 4K. And that's the original theatrical trilogy. Now, when it came time to do home media versions of those 3 films, either on VHS or Laserdisc, there were slight changes made already to the 3 films. A couple of sound tweaks, like lines of dialogue, a couple of wipes and dissolves, and the special effects were tweaked as well. So all the home media versions, like this is the earliest home media version available that I have on VHS. It's also available on Laserdisc, the 20th Century Fox CBS versions. They are the earliest or closest to the theatrical versions as we'll get. But they're not the theatrical versions because they already have been tweaked from those theatrical versions. Now, to create these versions, you know, all the films at the time, we're talking early 80s. I don't even know if there is a date on these of when they were released. 1992. So when they made these versions in the early 90s, they would have been scanned at 1K and then on an analog master tape, then transcoded down to VHS and Laserdisc, and that's what would be on here. Still in an analog form. There's been no digital pokery, as it were. It hasn't been fed through an actual computer or been digitalized. So full analog, 1K source. This is the earliest version I own on VHS, so I don't have the laser discs. I'm happy with these. They're only 240 in terms of resolution. The laser discs are 480i, but I'm happy with these because I have got the original theatrical prints on Blu-ray and the 4K versions on my PC. So anyway, that's all good and fine, you know. And this was released out into the wild in the early 90s, the full trilogy sets, and Lucas went on his merry way making Indiana Jones, The Willow, whatever, you know, after the 3 films were made. Now, the reason these were released like this in 92 is because in about 1989, George Lucas was wanting to create the trilogy of prequel films that kind of came before these massively famous 3 films. And so in 1989 was already making sort of efforts to see what state the negatives were in and all that. And obviously they weren't in a good state, you know. So, like, as I think Rick McCallum and George Lucas have stated, they had to restore those, you know, first. And so they did. So after this box set was released, you know, this actually contains, you know, from the analog master that was created in the 80s, this set is from that original scan, which would have been done at 1K. But by the early 90s, they were actually scanning in 2K. And they went back, restored the films, you know, to save them, as they were already kind of, you know, colors were going and all sorts of weird stuff, and to create a new negative. And when they did that, they scanned it into the computer at 2K resolution and created the new see it for the first time or see it for the last time, the original trilogy but in THX, digitally remastered or digitally mastered. And what that means is that those original negatives were scanned at 2K resolution, locking the film's quality at 2K, put onto the computer, and then they did all the color timing and all the additional post work to create these new versions, the THX versions, which came out in 1995. Now, they're also available on Laserdisc as the Faces edition, and I believe the definitive version as well. And these would be, I guess, the best way to see the earliest versions, although these also had minor changes already from the previous versions as well. And this would be the best way because it has the THX sound and picture. It's mainly for the sound, really, but they did update the picture as well. But by doing this, they've created a digital version of these 3 films on a computer in 2K. And this became the basis, the blueprint, the next stage for George's special edition trilogy. And I really do believe the reason he went on to make the special edition trilogy was because at the time in 95, CGI or digital effects weren't at the place that he really wanted them to be at. We had Terminator 2, we had Jurassic Park, and that was the latest in CGI effects, bringing dinosaurs to life, and they did look good for that film. But I really do believe when George was thinking about writing out these new series of films, that it's gonna be a massive step up in terms of digital effects for what would be needed to be created for these films. Now, you got to remember, when Star Wars first came out, he revolutionized filmmaking in terms of special effects, creating the ILM company, being a massive influence on the next generation in terms of CG, what would be possible with special effects. The first original trilogy represents a milestone in cinema history in terms of what is now possible in special effects and storytelling, and that was because really of the original 3 trilogy. And I do think that George had a full intention to, with the new prequels, take it to the next level, and so needed the technology really to catch up, or needed to test it out first, and so did so by creating the special edition trilogy. So George is sitting there at his computer. He's got all 3 films in front of him. They're at 2K. And, at that time in 95, when they were making the special edition trilogy, they didn't have to remake the films because they had the 2K, digital intermediates on the computer with the live action, all the combined stuff ready to go. But in order to bring it and test all out his theories of digital effects, they went and filmed extra scenes on 35mm. They went and rendered CGI graphics in 2K on the computer that would then be incorporated into the older 2K versions of these films to create the brand new editions of the Star Wars Special Edition trilogy, and these would become the new versions of the films moving forward, knowing with the intention that there would be prequels to come before this, and that the technology, it is kind of possible to be able to do those prequels because here is the proof of concept, and also helped raise the money for the prequels as well. And so with the special edition trilogy, this represents the possibility of the prequels, and the stories that he wanted to tell. He knew there would be massive amounts of special effects, and I guess that put George in 2 minds. Do I continue to film on 35mm and then have to incorporate all these effects on the computer and merge them with the film, or is it going to be best to have digital cameras film this trilogy, and then with that digital footage I can then incorporate digital effects, and it all can be digital on the computer, easier to edit because by 1999 they were editing digitally as opposed to the old-fashioned way, and so I do believe he really wanted to push the cinema technology of completely using digital technology forward, and that's what the special edition trilogy represents. So all of these 3 films come from the live action 2K resolution digital intermediate footage that was then mixed with 2K rendered special effects, CGI animation, and then what would be classed as optical effects in the original trilogy were now digital effects, being done on the computer, the laser blasts, the lightsabers, being able to make better color timings for these films, and basically creating a 2K locked resolution of these films. Now, these films at 2K, because they were finished in 2K, would then be printed to 35mm film to go out to the theaters, because at this time, 1997, we didn't have digital cinema. It was still 35mm film. So now the film has been printed on 35mm, but everything on that film has a resolution lock of 2K. So moving forward, the best it's only ever going to look is 2K, which in 1997 didn't make any difference because DVD had only just splashed on the scene. It was still Laserdisc and VHS at that point. And so the resolution of those two formats was way below 2K and was absolutely fine. So it was never thinking of a future-proof system. Like, if DVD, which was still kind of almost the same resolution as Laserdisc, it would still show the good quality on these, transfers. So George probably wasn't worried about the high-definition revolution, although he probably was thinking about it, but wasn't worried about it for the special edition. So now the theatrical versions have been released, and then we finally get, them on home media, Laserdisc, VHS, but not DVD. No, not DVD, because George ain't finished yet. Now it's time to go and, make the prequels. Now that we've raised some money and awareness and got Star Wars hyped back up again, let's go make those prequels. So they start off with, wanting to film everything digitally. Unfortunately, the cameras were not ready at the time that The Phantom Menace went into production, so they had to use 35mm cameras for this film. Now, George was still kind of moving into the digital world, so a lot of effects that were made on here or in the film were made in 2K on a computer. They did have some models as well that were being shot on 35mm along with like the live action. And there were also some CGI elements that were basically a digital representation of the models that they were making, so they kind of had like one of each then and blended them seamlessly. But like, apart from the live action photography and the model photography, everything else is in 2K resolution. It was rendered, built on the computer in 2K, and when it came time to make a final negative of this film, the film was scanned in 2K, because we're talking it's 1998. They were still scanning 2K. They weren't scanning 4K back then, but they were scanning 2K and merging all the elements together to make a finished 35mm print. That went on to the cinemas. There were no digital cinemas still in 1999, and so The Phantom Menace was released. Now, it was released with a couple of unfinished effects in the theaters. So for future releases like on Laserdisc, VCD, and even eventually DVD, George Lucas went and finished those effects, kind of cleaned up a few effects as well, but any release on home media of The Phantom Menace is not the theatrical version. There are slight changes from those theatrical prints. In fact, the first 6 films, all the theatrical runs of those films were altered for home release. There is not one single version that has a theatrical version on home release. It's such a shame that theatrical versions aren't available to watch, but George likes to say this is now the definitive version. So, So now he's done that film, done and dusted, and during the making of this film, the digital cameras became available. In fact, one scene in The Phantom Menace was shot with a digital camera at 2K, and that's the scene with Darth Maul and the Emperor talking on the balcony, and that's the only scene in that film shot on a digital camera at 2K resolution. So at the end of the day, everything was finished at 2K with this film. So the film is locked to 2K because of its effects, because of the way they handled the 35mm print. So when it hit the theaters, again on 35mm, it still had a locked resolution of 2K, just like the special edition trilogy before it. Then it came time to do Attack of the Clones, but as the digital cameras now were available for Attack of the Clones, he shot this entirely on 2K digital. Now, I say 2K, but it's not really 2K, because the actual resolution on the sensor was 1440 by 960. It was cropped. It's a widescreen format. So that's not even the standard of Blu-ray. And that's how this film was made, entirely with the live action elements. All the CGI on here, which was more heavily used, in fact, I don't think they made any models for this film, I could be wrong, but all the CGI again was made in 2K. Yoda dancing around with Count Dracula, all in 2K. When I say Count Dracula, I mean Count Dooku, obviously. Christopher Lee played Dracula, You know what I mean, But this entire film is locked in 2K. There are no elements that were shot on film that could have a true 4K scanned nature. It's all locked in 2K. And I think moving forward, it does show on this one more than any of the others of the limitations of George's decision to shoot digitally. And the reason he decided to shoot digitally would because it would be cheaper to shoot digitally and merge it with the digital effects, which they were going to be massive. I mean, he wanted to create digital sets, and not have to go on location, and do kind of like what they're doing now with The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, where they have a giant room as a digital environment. Technology wasn't there at the time, so it was all like green and blue screened, but it was entirely digital, and it was a lot cheaper than doing it on 35mm with sets like they did with Phantom Menace. And then, because at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for these films, and so they want to make it cost effective, so everything shot digitally. Now, that was done and dusted, locked. Again, by the time it hit home media, it had differences of sound, effects, wipes and dissolves were changed. It's not the theatrical version. But when it came time to do Revenge of the Sith, the cameras had evolved. They were a little bit better, but not in their resolution, only in the way that they capture, like light and color. So the color and the contrast, the brightness and all this is much better, but it's still the same resolution. The cameras hadn't evolved to 4K. They're still using 2K digital cameras to shoot the live action photography, merging it with all the CGI built on the computer, rendered in 2K, and then creating that negative, because again, digital cinemas, actually no, there were digital cinemas available by this time, so there were two negatives made. There was a digital negative that could then, a DCP that could then be sent out to cinemas to be played digitally, and a 35mm negative that could then go on to make prints for cinemas. So those who saw this, and I think actually it was same for this one as well, but those who saw this film in a digital cinema noticed that the colors were bolder, the sharpness was there, but on a 35mm print where the colors weren't a match because it had been basically transported to a different medium, colors were slightly different on this one, and it was a bit softer in focus. But there was a 35mm print available for all three of these films, combined of 2K locked resolution elements. And then finally George goes, okay guys, we can have it now. The original Star Wars trilogy on DVD, special edition. Here we go. So George is sitting at his table again. He's got the 2K intermediates on his computer of the special edition trilogy, but you know what? He ain't happy, because now that the prequels have been made, there's a lot of elements in this new trilogy that don't match up to what he shot. The Emperor in this version of The Empire Strikes Back is not the same actor who was in the prequels. There were other changes as well that needed to be made for continuity's sake, so they went and filmed that all on 2K cameras. They redid some audio loops, they redid some music, they redid the effects, you know, and basically created 3 brand new versions of Star Wars, the original trilogy. Special edition on the basis of which was locked in 2K, remember. But this time, they went to those, because obviously all of these have a 35mm print. And what George did this time is he scanned this in 4K, because we're in 2005 now, I believe these came out. And Georgie scanned all the special edition trilogy prints from the theater in 4K. So he's sitting in front of 3 4K intermediates, and he's got all the footage that he's filmed that can be integrated in here, that's shot at 2K. And then he basically makes his little merge of all 3 of these new films, you know, that've got changes in them again. Audio cues that are different, you know, like Ben Kenobi with his monster grown in the desert and everything else, and now creates a 2K digital intermediate, because it's going to go to DVD. But he's got a 4K original scan intermediate of the theatrical prints. But then he's created with, because he made 2K, he filmed 2K stuff and 2K CGI probably, because I think Jabba was replaced or updated on these versions. And so created a new 2K intermediate. And that's what you've got on these DVDs, a 2K intermediate that came from a 4K scan source of 2K elements within a 35mm print. I hope you're following all this, because it's going to be very important for the 4K releases. And everybody was happy. Like, everybody loved this release. There was a 4th disc, the Empire of Dreams documentary, the bonus content, and you know, these are everyone's favorite way to watch the Star Wars saga. And then of course everything went quiet for a few years, and then suddenly, you know, Blu-ray came out literally around the same time that this came out. But good old George, luckily he'd scanned at 4K, so when it came time to remake the series, as it were, all 6 films now up to date, because obviously he's getting ready to sign on the dotted line to say, get rid of Star Wars, go to Disney now. He goes back to, you know, to say a final fuck you to the fans. And he goes back to those, you know, intermediates, probably the 2K ones, where it's the finished film on there. But he could have gone back to the 4K scans, you know, putting in all that other footage. Either way, he went and created, you know, because he wanted to make it on Blu-ray now for the saga set, started to make changes again. And the reason he did, and I believe he went back to the 4K scans, because he wanted to make, because we're in 2010 now, you know, this came out in 2011, and in 2010, like, CGI still wasn't being rendered by ILM in 4K. That didn't happen until like 2012, 2013. But I think George, thinking ahead this time, wanted to put 4K elements into his 4K scans to create a new master for the Blu-ray that would look better than the DVD, but basically it is from the same source, isn't it? Because the films from these come from the exact same source as the DVDs before it. So if he then like took the 4K scans of the original trilogy, the special edition versions, created 4K rocks, blinking Ewoks, and other, you know, replaced the laser blasts in 4K, and then transcoded everything down to Blu-ray quality, this would appear to look sharper than the DVD, even though it has the exact same elements contained within it, because everything stems from those original 2K original DIs, you know. And I believe that's what happened with this set. I mean, it's a fantastic set. 3 discs of extras. You've got all 6 films, commentaries. It's a really decent set, and this probably represents the best Star Wars looks on home media, because it hasn't been upscaled effectively, because it's on Blu-ray. I mean, it has been upscaled because it was done at 4K level when it has 2K elements within it, and so all those 2K elements were being upscaled during the 4K scan. But effectively, being on Blu-ray, it's then coming down to a downscale below the 2K level, and so this probably represents the best it ever looks in terms of picture sharpness, quality, color, blah 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 blah, all that good stuff. And then obviously Disney House of Mouse buys Star Wars and goes, "Hey, we're gonna make some Star Wars films. Haha, here we go." And so the sequel trilogy gets made, and I think The Force Awakens came out in 2015. Now, by then, films were being rendered at 4K in terms of the CGI, by 2015. But the sequel trilogy that was made was still shot on 35mm. Disney weren't going to do a George and shoot it digitally. They shot on 35mm as well as digital. Mixture of stuff, but all the elements of CGI that are in here were done in 4K. Now, each director, and there were only 2 of these directors, handled their films a little bit differently. J.J. Abrams was like, "I'm Spielberg Jr., so I'm doing this for the fans, and I know what it's like to be a fan because I was a bloody fan." And actually did a lot of model work as well as CGI and on-set practical stuff. All of that was 35mm. There was CGI rendered at 4K, and then of course this was presented in the theaters both digitally, and I believe there were prints available to watch it on as well. I watched it digitally in 3D for the very first time, and this would have been created into a 4K digital intermediate when it was being put together in the mastering stage. And so those 4K digital, they would have created a DCP package, would have then gone off to the cinema. So exactly at the cinema would have been 4K, and because it was all shot on film, you would be watching a 4K scan of that 35mm film, then mastered to 4K. You'd be watching a legit 4K film. And 4K was around in various cinemas in 2015. The cinema that I used to work at around the same time was only doing 2K though, but it still looked really good. So of course when it came out on home media, it's a no-brainer to take that 4K digital intermediate to create the Blu-ray. 4Ks on discs were not a thing then, back in 2015. So it's basically a no-brainer. So obviously when this came to home media, I bought the best version available. Blu-ray comes with the 3D version like I saw at the cinema, and it's a really good 3D conversion. Obviously it then has a bonus disc, so for me I've got the best version on here, but it's come from a 4K scan. So Blu-ray can hold a 4K detail nicely. It just doesn't have the HDR color pop or the extended range for lightness and brightness and all that. But this looks really good and I'm totally happy. I can't justify paying another 20 quid just to upgrade this to 4K when what's on here has come from a 4K master. I've effectively still got the 4K locked in a Blu-ray. Obviously not true though, 4K, and not HDR and all that good stuff. But it still looks bloody good, as everybody was happy with when that got released. And then of course, Rian Johnson made some decisions nobody likes, and The Rise of Skywalker, they literally had to bring JJ back to rescue the series, because Disney were just making it up as we went along. Kathleen Kennedy was probably rolling dice going, "There's your decision, let's go do it." Like, these films are okay, but I think there are fans for it, but everyone's got their own opinion, and that's fine. But the technical achievements, they were filmed 35mm, all the effects were rendered in 4K, they were then scanned at 4K to a digital cinema package, released theatrically in 4K, and on this disc is a true 4K. and that's how I have them in 4K. And they look fantastic. And obviously Star Wars Force Awakens is available in 4K. These 3 films are the only films that are possible to have a true 4K. And these exact same discs on these packages are what is in that Star Wars Family Saga set. So if I was to go buy that Family Saga set for 250 quid, I'd be basically getting the same exact content that is on these discs. They didn't do anything special. They literally just got new printed discs and they go into that case. So I'd be rebuying 2 films I already have in 4K. Anyway. And but now, the 6 films, you know, in that Family Saga set, you know, the original 6 films, as it were, pre-Disney, it is impossible for these 6 films to be in 4K, like native true 4K, because the best that these all are at are 2K. Because to make the original trilogy for the special edition, it was destroying the negative to build a new negative, and that was scanned at 2K to create the new negative, which was the basis for the special edition. So 2K resolution is what these films are in from this point on. There is no 4K-ness, it's 2K. And so when the special edition was created, it was locked at 2K. Every element within here is 2K. It's an upscale to 4K in that Saga set. You can't get around the facts. You can bitch about all you like, but that's what the facts are. And even with these two were filmed in 2K. All the effects were done in 2K. It was finished in 2K. Like, you might scan the negative at 4K and pick up all that great detail, but the elements you're scanning are 2K because they were locked in a digital environment at 2K before then transferred to a film negative. It's still 2K in that film, you know. Effectively, these films, and George wanting to push the boundaries and create new boundaries for cinema, really destroyed the future of these films in terms of what was possible now on home media, because now these could never truly, well, say, not Phantom Menace because it was shot in 35mm, but these 2 films were now kind of destroyed for future use because they're all locked in 2K. There is no way to get better quality when it's been sourced at 2K. You're upscaling everything. All the effects were made, like, for that 4K set, all they did was replace the laser blasts in 4K. Like, that's it. And the lightsaber effects were now rendered in 4K and then put back in. Like, that's it. Which was already done by George himself for the Blu-ray set. And that's all the work that was done for that 4K set. All the you know, this Blu-ray is sourced from a 4K master, which is exactly what you got on that 4K disc. What you're actually paying for with that Saga set is the lovely artwork and the ability to use HDR on a 4K format for those films. There are a lot of instances where there are kind of whites are too bright and the colors don't look accurate because these films don't require HDR, but they've been given it on that format and kind of changed everything. And I'm sure they had to do a few color changes to make things match up, so comparison videos will show different whites because the 4K format has a higher, you know, band of white, so it can utilize more of that territory, as it were. But it's still all from a 2K source, and they can never be a 4K unless, and Disney are never going to do this, going back to the original negatives, right, and rescanning those in 4K and rebuilding the special edition films and rebuilding the Phantom Menace by creating all new 4K CGI, new 4K sets, replacing all the CGI in the prequel trilogy. They would have to rebuild the films from scratch like for the first 6 films. Then they could scan the negatives and then make a true 4K. And that is so much money to do that. Disney are not doing that, because Disney put only the effort in to a package where they know they're making money back. And that Saga set has a really nice box. You open it up like a dynamite bomb, and inside is the boom. You open it up like a book, and you open the pages to nice artwork, but all the discs are in cardboard slips that you have to basically ruin your disc to take out. It's Disney's fuck you to the fans is what it is. It's like, here you go fans, take this, give us 250 quid for it, and don't watch it because you'll ruin it, you know. Anyway, that's my Star Wars little ranty. It's basically, you're only getting 3 4K films that, you know, I've already bought my 4Ks of Star Wars. I ain't buying again. You know, I need to get Solo, I need to get Rogue One. I'll buy those in 4K because they were all made in 4K and they will all look great. But that's it, man. I ain't buying that Saga set. Now, like I said before, yeah, all the Star Wars films, okay, all the 9 films that are available on Star Wars, right? How do I watch them? Well, if I'm only ever going to watch the 3 original films, I do check out the Blu-ray theatrical versions. If I'm never gonna, if in a single sitting I just want to watch the 3 originals, I'll watch the 3 originals. I have access to them. That's that. But if I'm going to go through all 9 films together, then I kind of do have to stick to, you know, DVDs in some respects. So when I go to watch, you know, the prequels, you know, I'll actually watch those on the Blu-ray, because that's probably the best versions of those 3 films, you know. Even though the prints were scanned at 4K for this Blu-ray, which is an upscale technically, they're presented in 1080p, so it's all good. So for the prequel trilogy, I watched the Blu-rays, but for the original OG trilogy, in line with everything else, I go back to those DVDs and I watch in this way, and that's how I watch that. And obviously, then I watch the others in 4K and Blu-ray, and that is how I watch the Star Wars trilogy. But how do you watch it? And also, the namings for all of them are incorrect if you think about it. So let's go through them. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This film is about the Sith rising up to come back, as it were, you know, to take hold of the galaxy. This is the beginning steps. Phantom Menace isn't the right title for this film. This one should be called Revenge of the Sith, because it is about the Sith coming back, because it even says in the film, one day we will have our revenge. You know, Darth Maul says it. It's like, this is Revenge of the Sith, really, because that's what this film is about. Yes, it's about a young Skywalker uprising and all this, but he's only a kid. He's only winning a pod race. Let's calm down. You know, this is actually Revenge of the Sith, you know. And then we get to episode 2, Attack of the Clones. But this in here, and it even shows him on the cover, is Anakin's rise before the fall. You know, this is the rise of Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker, this is about how he learns to go from being that little bratty kid in episode 1 to becoming a man in Attack of the Clones. This is Rise of the Skywalker, or Rise of Skywalker. That's what this film is, you know. And the third film, Revenge of the Sith. Like, this, yeah, it's not really the Sith revenging, because the Jedi have never had the upper hand with the Sith yet. The Jedi, up until this film, have been scrambling around in the dark while the Sith do things in the background. So what are the Sith taking revenge on? You know? This is actually called Attack of the Clones, because it starts off with the clone army battling it out. Like, this film ends with the clone army being created. They ain't attacking shit. They've just been created. Like, this film starts with the clones attacking everything else, and then Order 66, the clones go for the Jedis. This is Attack of the Clones, this is. Not Revenge of the Sith, right? And then we go to A New Hope. This is the one that started it all. George smoking something when he named this one, because this isn't about, like, A New Hope. The film starts off with the Empire. Doesn't start off with Luke looking at the sunset. The film starts off with the Empire chasing down the droids, and this is about the Empire striking back. This should be called The Empire Strikes Back, because in this film, that's exactly what they do. The Empire strikes back and Luke has to go and take him down. Like, again, this could be called Rise of Skywalker, but we've already used that. But this is The Empire Strikes Back for me. And then you go to The Empire Strikes Back. And this film is not about the Empire, I'm sorry. This film's about Luke and his rise of training, and him learning about the Force with Yoda in Dagobah. Him seeking out, you will go seek out Yoda, the master who trained me. This is the Force Awakens within Luke, realizing his power, being able to lift the plane and then go, oh, I can't do it yet. And then Yoda coming along going, yes you can. This is the Force Awakens, this film. Not The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, the Empire do attack our rebel friends, but they're like, that's what they always do. They're not striking back. Like, it starts off with them attacking Hoth, yes, but they haven't been defeated. Well, yeah, I suppose in A New Hope they got defeated, so they strike back again. But this film is not about the Empire. This film is about Luke and his journey towards his dad and saving his friends, and that's what the meat of the ending is all about. It ain't about the Empire, it's about Luke learning the ways of the Force and then going after his dad. This is The Force Awakens. And then you got Return of the Jedi. This is, honestly, Luke, by the end of this film, is the last Jedi. He ain't returning to shit. Like, yes, at the beginning he returns to save Han Solo, but he ain't a Jedi then. It's not until he returns to Dagobah and Yoda goes, I'm sick of you moaning, and just drops dead in front of him. I'm sick of all your questions, and just ends his own life, that then Luke becomes the last Jedi. I mean, his sister ain't a Jedi. He is the last Jedi. This film is not Return of the Jedi. It's The Last Jedi. And then, of course, we've got the sequel films now. Oh, it's not. The Force Awakens was the first one, sorry. The Force Awakens, right? In who? Because we don't see that happening at all in this film. We don't see Rey training. We see Rey getting picked up by an old man and his hairy companion, and them going on a little mish, for some reason, like trying to find Luke. Where's Luke? Gotta find Luke. I'll go with you. Do you know where Luke is? Yeah, I know where Luke is, kid. I'll show you. Well, that's not how the Force works. It's not The Force Awakens, this. This film is A New Hope. The Rey is the new hope that will rise up in the future, we're hoping. She gets her lightsaber in this film, and she uses it. So does Finn. Like, it could be Finn or Rey in this film, but this is not The Force Awakens. This is A New Hope, because it's a new start of the legacy. It's a new start of films. Nice try, Abrams. And then we've got The Last Jedi. And, yeah, it's not The Last Jedi, though, is it? Because Rey becomes a Jedi, or ish, in it. You've got Kylo Ren, who basically is the bad Jedi. You got Luke in that film, who is a Jedi Master in hiding. There's no Last Jedi on this. Okay, by the end, there's only 2 left, but there's not one last. This is Return of the Jedi. This is when Luke makes an appearance and actually, earns his money in the film. This is when he drinks his blue milk and he helps train Rey, to become a Jedi. This is Return of the Jedi. This is Rian Johnson. And then you've got the final film, Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, it could be. Could be the Rise of Skywalker. But that's not what this film is really about, is it? This film is about the Emperor starting shit up again. This is about some entity rising and making moves in the darkness, and nobody knows until the very end that it's the Emperor. I'm back, bitches. This is the Phantom Menace. This is the man in the darkness, in the shadows. I've been cloned, you know? Like, this film is the Phantom Menace, not the Rise of Skywalker. Like, I don't know if it's genius that all these titles are actually swapped out for other films, like, and make more sense for what that film is about, because these films were made by many different people. You got George Lurkey. You got George Lucas, right? You've got Irvin Kershner, whatever. You've got some other dude who did Return of the Jedi. I can't remember your name. Sorry, mate. That's 3 directors right there. You got JJ, you got Ryan. 5 directors did 9 films, I think. Could be wrong, but I'm sure they did. And so the namings of all these films were made by different people, yet they fit each other's films more perfectly than their own. Like, I don't know if that's genius or just a complete idiotic coincidence, but they're the namings for these films that I believe make more sense than the film's own names. Anyway, I think we've had enough of Star Wars. It's almost been an hour. And, you know, you've probably tried to use the Force to shut me down and shut me up. But that 4K saga set, all those people on YouTube, you know, I'm glad you love it. I'm glad all your unboxing videos. I'm so excited. You know, 4K, but it's not 4K. It's 2K at best. You know, just upscaled. And a lot of 4Ks. You know, any film that was basically made before 2013 will have upscaled elements within it. So what's the point in buying them on 4K? You might as well just go buy them on Blu-ray, and they'll look better. Any film made after 2013 will all have potential for being true 4K. So I'm buying 4Ks for films only after 2013 from now on. I got too many upscales in my collection, and I don't like that. And it's rebuying films they already own as well. So save a bit of money, you know, make the films look a bit better. Your 4K player, your TV, they'll upscale films to match your display anyway. Anyway, thank you for watching this. If you've got this far, just put in the comments down below, like, you are a Master Jedi. And then I'll know you've actually made it this far, because I don't think anybody will. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye. And one day I will review all these films, by the way.